Good morning folks, Ken Ring here of PredictWeather.com. I just thought we'd spend a bit of time talking about Easter and its origins, because it's the only festival left over from ancient times that is still tied to the moon, which is why each place around the world often gets the same weather trends out of it, year after year. But the patterns differ depending on what season they're in. You know, in New Zealand it generally rains sometime over the Easter weekend and the skies clear up when everybody goes back to work. It's the common joke around here. Now, historically, it's an interesting story. The equinox date, which is always March the 20th to the 22nd, in the year 325 AD, it was March the 20th. And the Romans and just about everybody else celebrated the equinox because it was the beginning of spring. The equinox, remember we've been talking about that's to do with the earth going past the sun in the course of the year. Now the tradition in ancient Israel was that the first day of spring would not start until the barley was ripe, as that would be a more logical test for the fact that the spring had actually arrived. So, you know, the Jewish people are always very practical. So the Jewish festival called the Passover starts about a week later. Well, this year it's the 30th of March. And it also celebrates God freeing the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt, led by Moses, and that story is in the book of Exodus, as everybody knows. Now, Passover lasts 8 days. In the Jewish tradition, it is the Passover festival. If you live in Israel, it's 7 days. Now, if you were living back then, your calendar was still based around the moon, and the new moon was the start of the month, and when you saw the first crescent, everybody had a bit of a celebration. Now, you had 12 months in the year, and every 2 or 3 years, you added a month to catch up to the sun for your year to be, for your seasons to be constant, so the year was still a year. Pesach, that's Passover, starts right on the 14th day of the month of Nisan, which means it's the day of the full moon, exactly 2 weeks out from the new moon, which was the start of the month. So that was fairly easy to calculate. When the Christian church gathered momentum, they wanted a point of difference, and anti-Semitism always gave them a buzz. So in 325 AD, Pope Constantine hosted a big conference called the Council of Nicaea of cardinals and bishops to discuss all this. And one of the key points on the agenda was how they could upset the Jews, because they were spreading the belief that the Jewish people were responsible for the death of Jesus, which of course wasn't true. The Romans did it. And if you remember, Jesus was celebrating the Passover when he was put on the cross. That Last Supper in the paintings, that was the Seder night, the big festival meal. So the Romans ended up shifting the date of the Passover, which was a festival everybody had been continuing because the Christians had been carrying on the Jewish traditions. And they moved it back to being more associated with the equinox than the moon. And they virtually voted back in a bunch of pagan merchandise, you know, rabbits and eggs and candy and stuff, which were the old Roman symbols of celebrating the equinox. Which, you know, they were gifts people gave each other, which always happened around March the 20th. So they grabbed the name Easter because Easter, which is E-A-S-T-R-E, was actually the goddess of spring, which begins on the equinox. But now their aim was to distance the congregations from the Pesach, which is, you know, the Passover, and to give it a more distinctive Christian flavour. So that's how it kind of came about. Also, they decided that the focus would become the Sunday of Easter, which was calculated to be another annoyance to the Jews, because the spiritual day in any week for the Jewish people is always a Saturday. So now Easter Sunday is the Sunday following the Pesach full moon date for the year, which is the first full moon after March the 20th, which was the equinox date in 325 AD. So it's a bit confusing, but for instance, this year the Jewish Pesach begins March the 30th, Easter begins April the 2nd. And what's funny is that this heavily Christianized festival is still reliant on the old Jewish calendar. Well, I like to think of Passover and Easter as something to do with the moon and the spring of autumn down here in the southern hemisphere, and then the fact that the kids have a good time, you know, no matter what the religion is of their parents. So I'll be telling you about the Easter weather in New Zealand, Australia and Ireland in the next day or two. So keep tuned, and thanks for watching this morning.